Question 3, Honourable Member for Arbory, Castletown, Malew, Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr President. I would like to ask the Chief Minister what data the government collects about owner occupation and the purchase of new housing.
Chief Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr President. The main source of information that government holds about owner-occupiers in terms of who they are is from the census. And this will again be collected in 2021 and will provide us with a wide range of data about our island's residents. Now, if the Honourable Member has specific queries about owner-occupiers, then I would encourage him to speak with officers in the Cabinet Office about this. In answer to the second part of the Honourable Member's question, property transactions of old and new housing are all registered with the Land Registry to give effect to the transactions. The Government therefore holds data about all new housing purchased, including the name of the owner, the address, the location and the purchase price. However, it is not easy to distinguish between old and new properties, as there is no marker or indicator within the Land Registry to show this. However, most larger developments of residential housing are often purchased directly from the developer under a process known as transfer of part. Using this to estimate of the purchasing of new housing, the Land Registry estimates that 181 new properties were purchased in 2020 to date and 137 in 2019 for the whole year. If the Honourable Member would like information going back further, he may wish to contact the Land Registry directly.
Honourable Members may remove their jackets if they wish. Mr Moorhouse, a supplementary.
Thank you, Mr President. Thank you, Chief Minister, for that detailed answer. Does the Government recognise the potential of using this data as a way to better understand how new estates can become established communities and not just groupings of transitory people?
Chief Minister replies, sir.
Thank you, Mr President. I mean, whenever we get data, there's all sorts of ways of looking at it. What is transitory? We've got villages and small towns where people go to work every day. Into Douglas, Mr President, does that make them transitory? Or does he mean people coming over for short-term work on the island who don't have long-term requirements to stay here or needs? If the Honourable Member would like to come and speak to me to give me a more detailed view of what he would like to see, then I'm more than happy to see if we can help out.
Honourable Member for Middle, Mr Shimmons.
Thank you, Mr President. The figures quoted by Chief Minister on house purchases this year seem actually relatively low. And that may well be because I'm unsure if the Chief Minister is aware, but there's a 12-month time lag for people to register property transactions at the Land Registry, and that means the data we have is really out of date. It could be possible to narrow that window for registration to a shorter period of perhaps 1 month or 2 months, and that would provide a more accurate picture of the island's housing market. And also, it would be possible, due to the different declarations now for buy-to-let properties following the change in land registry fees, to identify which is owner-occupier and which is buy-to-let. Would the Chief Minister support these small changes to the land registry procedures, which would actually give a much richer source of data on what's happening in the housing market in our island?
Chief Minister.
Thank you. And the Honourable Member for Middle, Mr President, does make a good valid point that with the delays in property registrations coming in, there can be quite a time lag. So a property boom in 2019 might not rear itself from a numerical point of view, Mr President, until halfway through 2020. But I'm more than happy to take the comments from the Honourable Member for Middle back to the relevant department and to see if there is a way without dramatically increasing the resources required to collate all this information. I don't want to have a supplementary question about more officers being employed to gather data from the Honourable Member for Onchan. So there's a balance of, can we simply gather the information or speed up the registering of the sale of a property without too much extra cost, but I'll certainly ask my team to look into it, Mr President.
Supplementary, Mr Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the Chief Minister accept that the change from 16% of private housing occupied for rent to 22% between 2016 census and 2018 private housing condition survey could be quite significant? Secondly, does the Chief Minister share my disappointment that he had to answer on 15th of September this year that government doesn't actually know the proportion of houses that are rented reliably, the difference, because it's quite hard to have a housing policy without actually knowing that information? And does he accept we need to do an ad hoc sampled survey to find out more information about this?
Chief Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thought second part to the honourable member for Douglas Central's question about the number of houses that are rented. I would hope that the census would next year would show us this, because you'll be able to tick a box: are you living in rented accommodation or owner-occupied information? So that will hopefully solve the honourable member's concerns on that. Is it significant, 16 to 22%? Yes, it's a significant increase, I suppose, if you compare, but you have to compare it maybe with other jurisdictions. If you look at France, I think there is a significantly higher percentage of people who live in rented accommodation. But for me personally, the important question is, do we provide enough housing for our young people to get on the property ladder? And that's why personally I supported the Eastern Area Plan, because it was creating over 400, I think it was 480 odd circa houses to help people get on the property ladder. And I think that's important, that we give our people, if they wish to own their own house, we give them the support to enable that to happen where possible.
Final supplementary question, Mr. Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excuse me. Building slightly on what Mr. Thomas suggests, is there any way we could actually have more potential detail in terms of who's purchasing new houses? Some data has recently come out in the UK, and it suggested a figure as high as 70% in Blackpool, which is way above where we currently are, but potentially an area we can move towards, and that would really impact on local people and their chances to buy a house in their local area. Thank you.
Chief Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. I understand where the honourable members come from, because I think we all have the concern that we want to enable our local people to be able to buy property. But then we can't say only locals can buy property, and people who have the right to come and live on the island are exempt. So I think what is important is that we ensure that the schemes that we come up with and constantly review to look at ever-changing markets and ways of financing are improved to enable people living on the Isle of Man, to give them the ability to get on the housing ladder, Mr. President.